And we're live. Hi there. Welcome to the fourth and final day of the Step Up Your STEM Challenges workshop. We are doing a deep dive this whole week into the Tower Classic STEM Challenge. So at this point, what we have done so far is built the towers ourselves to kind of give ourselves some idea of what our students will be going through and experiencing. I should say experiencing, because going through has sort of a negative feel to it, doesn't it? And then we went in and we added in layers of difficulty, or at least explored those layers, because you might be adjusting to make it less difficult for maybe younger or less experienced students. You might be adding in layers of difficulty for your older students. And then on day 3, we went through and really checked out our content standards and multiple subject areas, because if we're going to take the time to build in our classrooms, we might as well get all the juice for the squeeze, right? So incorporate as many different academic content areas and line up your standards, make your administrators happy, your parents, and make yourself happy too, right? And now today what we're going to do is we're going to sort of tie it all up in a nice little bow, because now what you have is a fantastic criteria and constraints list that you are ready to implement this Tower Challenge in your classroom. But what you probably need to know is just those little last minute things, those little details. How do I put this into my plan book? How does this look in the classroom when we actually go through and do this STEM challenge? So the first thing that I want to do before I even pull in, you know what, I should pull in the agenda, because I do want to show you what we're doing today. Then I'm going to pull it back out for a second. So the review we just did, we were talking about lesson planning today. We're going to talk a little bit especially about multiple iterations, why they're important, and how to make them more practical in your classroom, because I know that's a sort of a sticking point for a lot of people. And then we'll talk about next steps. Since this is the last day, officially the last day of the challenge, we want to talk about what's coming next and what you can do to continue your STEM challenge growth and PD and all that. Then of course we have raffle prizes, and we'll do some Q&A if there is any at the end. So I'm going to pull this off, because the first thing I want to do actually is I want to show you this short 2-minute video that sort of goes through what I call the STEM challenge cycle, and it sort of breaks down what the lessons look like in my classroom. So let me go ahead and pull that in. Let's go through the steps of the STEM challenge cycle you should use for every STEM challenge. 1. Plan. Give your students 5 to 10 minutes to plan what they're going to design. You can let students think silently for a time, draw their ideas, discuss with their teammates, or use a combination of approaches. Consider mixing it up and not always using the same approach, so students gain experience with different methods of planning. 2. Build. Students build their designs using a criteria and constraints list as their guide. Depending on the complexity of the challenge, the build phase can last anywhere from 15 to 40 minutes. During this time, the teacher acts as a facilitator by walking the room, checking in with groups, and asking questions. Be careful not to be too leading or solve design problems for the groups. It can be a difficult balance to strike, but it becomes easier with practice. 3. Share. Give groups 2 to 3 minutes to present, explain, and demonstrate their designs. For those not finished, groups share how their designs will look and work when done. Groups can also take questions from their peers. 4. Record and reflect. Allow 10 to 15 minutes for students to record the results and reflect upon the challenge. All of my STEM challenges come with handouts for this purpose. 5. Discuss. Students should hold a broad discussion about the challenge either within their groups or the whole class for about 10 minutes. My challenges come with a set of 8 discussion questions. 7 are standard, and 1 is a different quote to analyze and apply to the challenge at hand. 6. Extend. In the days that follow the first iteration, teach standards-based lessons that apply to the challenge, or have students conduct related research to aid in their next designs. 7. Next iteration. STEM challenges work well as both introduction and culminating activities to both inspire students to learn about the content you wish to teach and to prove they have learned the content well enough to apply it in their designs. Holding a second or even third iteration is like creating drafts in the writing process. Each iteration gives students an opportunity to refine their designs, apply new learning, and take new risks. While not always practical, one should aim to conduct at least 2 iterations as often as possible. You will be amazed with the growth in problem solving and critical thinking you'll see when you do. For more information on STEM challenges, follow me using the links included below. So that's sort of our broad overview of what the lesson structure looks like, and we'll talk a little bit more about the individual steps. So let me go ahead and I'm going to pull the agenda back in so we can keep track of where we're at. and I'm also going to go ahead and share the PowerPoint presentation. Let me go ahead and move this a little bit. Okay, now we are tweaked pretty well. Okay, so we already did this review, so I'm going to skip right ahead. So this is just, again, the broad breakdown of the STEM challenge cycle. This is about how much time I spend in each phase. And we'll talk, like I said, a little bit more about each of these as we go. But what you should know is, because I am trying to keep this to about a half an hour, I could talk about this all day long. So I want you to be aware that most of those steps and beyond that, I've already created videos that sort of go a little bit more in depth in each of them. So as we're going through today, please do feel free to ask your questions always. But also, if you're thinking, you know what, I'd like to know a little bit more about, what are some different ways I can have my students plan before they start building, or I'm a specialist teacher and I only get to see the kids for 35 or 40 minutes. How do I make that work? So you can see these are just a sampling of some of the videos that are available where you can do a little bit more of a deep dive on individual topics if we don't go enough into depth for you today. And these are on my YouTube channel. They are also on stemchallenge.com. Here are just a few more examples for you. And beyond just the little PD videos that I have, there are, and here are some more ideas. Beyond those, I also do a challenge walkthrough video for any of my individual STEM challenges. So if you're looking for more, those videos do exist, okay? So we are going to try to keep it to a half an hour. So just know that that's available, all right? So when you are actually putting this into your plan book, there are some things that obviously you want to consider. Now, you'll notice that on the STEM challenge cycle, I said the build time is anywhere from 15 to 40 minutes, and that's quite a broad range, right? That's not an easy thing to adjust into your plan book. Now, the tower challenge, depending, if you're just doing height, that's not terribly complex, so that I would definitely err on the side of more like the 15 to 20 minute range. If you have, I'd say K through 2, maybe even K3, I might give them up to 25, 30 minutes. Even, especially because we're toward the beginning of the year, and I'm assuming that you're going to be doing this toward the beginning of the year. Typically, I will allow around an hour for a STEM challenge, and that's everything from the build through the discussion, the reflection, all of that part, and then extensions and multiple iterations would come on different days. At the beginning of the school year, I might give myself, if I'm self-contained and I have the luxury of it, I might give myself 90 minutes. And the reason is that I'm going to use that time for my STEM challenge, not just for the challenge, but also to practice procedures and routines. So I might actually pause the build time a few different times to sort of remind them about maybe, ways that it's appropriate to get more materials or put materials back, or just to pause and do anything that might need to be done in order to set expectations properly for my classroom for that school year. So I always give my STEM challenges more time at the beginning of the year, just so that I have the luxury of doing that. So another thing that you want to think about with your lesson plan considerations, and this is just actually within the criteria and constraints list itself. I mentioned earlier in the week that I would talk about self-differentiation within a challenge on day 4, and here we are. So I wanted to make sure that I held true to that promise. One thing you can do is within the criteria and constraints list, you can word things in a way that allow students in their groups to decide to go a little bit more above and beyond than they necessarily have to, or to make things a little trickier for themselves if they want to. Now, at the beginning of the year, they often maybe are not feeling that bold, but by mid-year, many, if not most, of the groups will take the harder version of the challenge. So I just gave you a couple of examples here, what you might be able to do in your criteria and constraints list if you want to have this as an option. So we would say build a tower that is at least 18 inches tall and holds a base 10 block at the top. That's our baseline criteria for success. So if the groups are able to make an 18-inch tower that holds any base 10 block at the top, they have succeeded in this challenge. But what you've really done is opened this up for students to make some adjustments if they want to do something kind of extra and special, right? Do they put a 1, a 10, or a hundreds base 10 block at the top, right? Obviously, the hundreds is going to be a lot heavier, so that's going to be more challenging to do. You could also say, yes, 18 inches with 1 base 10 block is the base goal, but just explicitly state to them a taller tower would be even better, or a larger number. So maybe they're building a large number, right, is better. or make at least one tower is another thing that you can say, so that students, if they decide to, they can make 2 towers within their groups. One thing that you do definitely need to consider with your lesson plan considerations is how you're going to handle failure and frustration, because those are 2 things that can and will come up in your STEM challenges, and they should come up in your STEM challenges if you are creating truly challenging challenges. Then the students are not always going to be successful. So you need to be prepared for that. And one thing that I always recommend is just sort of for yourself, especially if you're kind of like me and maybe grew up with more of a fixed mindset and maybe even a little bit of a fear of failure. I always have to remind myself going into my STEM challenges that I have goals of them developing their growth mindset, and I have an expectation that failure can and will happen, and failure is not a bad thing. In fact, failure can lead to really great lessons. So you want to keep that in mind as you go in so that you're prepared for it and you don't panic if and when it happens. So you want to build some potential time in either that day or the next day if you need to sort of address any sort of failure or frustration that has maybe bubbled up throughout the challenge, because you might need, it's not as common in this one, in the tower challenge, because it's a classic, right? Some of the more unique challenges that come up that students really have absolutely no background in, they've never built before. Everybody's built a tower, right, with blocks or something before. Everybody's done it. So they have some background in it. When they don't have any background in it, you're going to be more likely to be met with that failure or potential frustration. So we'll talk a little bit more about that when we come up into multiple iterations later on. So I will come back to it. Another few things for you to consider: will you research prior to the build? Will you have your students research before they start building? I don't recommend it. I'm not a fan of it for a couple of reasons. The main reason is that if they do research on towers before they start building, more likely than not, they'll be replicating something that they've already seen. So instead of creating something purely new and innovative and creative with their towers, they're going to try to basically build off of a model picture that they saw during the research. So my preference is actually to have them build first, no matter what the challenge is, and treat that as though it's hands-on research. Then after the fact, when we're doing our extensions, maybe we do research then, we're doing some standards-based lessons, and then we come back to a second iteration where they can apply whatever research or new information that they've learned. I prefer that method. It creates or results in more interesting designs. You want to think about where your extensions are going to fit in. So you obviously are going to plan in, okay, we have this ELA connection we're going to make. We have these science lessons I can apply and these math ones. Part of that is obviously to fill in your plan book with what you have made plans for. But another reason is so that you understand how long these towers need to stay, or whatever challenge you're doing, how long they're going to need to stay in your classroom, so that you can figure out if you need to add in size constraints on that list in order to really be able to keep them somewhere that doesn't make you insane. If you're going to have extensions that go on for a week or even beyond that, you need a good place to put those towers, and you need to make sure you have the space for it. You also need to consider how many iterations you want to do and how you're going to fit them in, because there are different ways to do that. And are the related content lessons pure extensions, or will something they learn or research help them improve their designs? Because that makes a difference as well. Because if they are actually going to be applying something from the lessons, as opposed to like some of the things we mentioned yesterday, would be, I think we mentioned count the faces, edges, and vertices. That's something you can do with your physical design, but having done that doesn't improve the design itself. So if you were to rebuild the design right then, unless you were building specifically for something that had more faces, edges, or vertices, something that would produce a bigger number if that's how you're scoring your points, but it's not really going to improve the design itself, right? It's not going to make the tower stand any taller to be able to count the faces, edges, and vertices if height was the challenge goal. So you do want to keep in mind, or ask yourself that in order to figure out, is this challenge worth a second iteration, a third iteration? Some challenges you'll do as one and done, and some you're going to want to do multiple extensions or multiple iterations on. One thing that this is my soapbox moment of the day. I think I have the soapbox on the next page. You do not want to skimp on the post-design activities. A lot of a lot of us are tempted to do that because we'll let the build go on maybe longer than we should because the students really want to and we're really interested in it. And then we all know how time runs out at the end of a lesson, and so we sort of rush those last few steps. We really need to keep ourselves accountable for that, because this is where really a lot of the magic happens in the STEM challenges. It's a lot like science experiments too, where we do the hypothesis, we do the actual procedure, we do the experiment, and then we skimp on those last steps, and the students don't develop their analysis and their scientific reasoning when we skip those steps. So this is basically the difference of a one and done challenge. There's some value in that, but the sharing out, the Q&A with their peers, reflecting, analyzing, discussing, extending with those standards-based lessons, and doing multiple iterations, there's all this beautiful depth that we sometimes miss if we don't make sure we've carved out time in our lesson plans for it. And all the stuff that's below the line doesn't necessarily have to happen on the same day that they build. So you can have this going on. What I try to make sure I have time to do in one day is the build and the sharing out and the Q&A. If I don't have time to do reflect, analyze, and discuss that day, I can postpone it to the next day. And the extensions and iterations, obviously, are on different days as well. If I can get all the way through discussion, if I have enough class time to do that, I will, because I think that's a really good cutoff point. But you got to do what you've got to do. So you just need to figure out, and you'll figure this out a little bit more as you do more STEM challenges, what actually fits and what doesn't. I'm pretty bad about cutting myself off for the discussions, because you'll hear these wonderful things that the students are realizing and learning, their aha moments, and it's very hard to cut them off. That happens within the sharing out as well in the Q&A. So, be flexible, I'll say that. With your multiple iterations, it's so important to give the students a second build as often as humanly possible. But don't beat yourself up if you don't get through a second or a third iteration on every challenge that you do. I think of it as a quick write versus having students go all the way through the writing process, all the way, through revising and editing and publishing. There is value to a quick write, the same way there is value to a one and done challenge. But if we never took students all the way through the writing process, they wouldn't develop those skills to refine their process and their end product, right? And the same thing is true with students in the engineering process. If we don't actually allow them to go through and do another iteration and improve upon their initial skills, they don't build up what they need to. We also need to give them an opportunity. When we talk a good game about growth mindset and, just thinking of the power of yet and all of those things, but if we don't give them the chance to actually grow and then demonstrate that they've learned something and that they've gotten better at something, that really undermines everything we're saying about growth mindset. So we do need to give them the opportunity to grow, a chance to grow, by allowing them to show that they can build a taller tower if given another chance, or a more interesting tower, or a stronger tower, whatever the goal was, right? Students also will take more risks and be more creative if they know they're going to get more than one chance at an individual challenge. This also mitigates collaboration and time issues. So if you have students who are maybe in a group, maybe you've put students in a group of 3 and somebody's idea got outvoted for how they were going to do the design. Now, this is always going to be upsetting for students if their design idea doesn't get chosen or selected within their group. But when they know there's going to be a second chance, it sort of takes a lot of the steam out of that problem or that issue for them, because they understand, okay, well, my idea was not chosen this time, but there's another opportunity coming. And so especially if this idea doesn't work, I don't have to be as frustrated as I might have been because I think my idea was better. And then the other thing is, you're going to notice, if you haven't already been doing STEM challenges, when you call time, you're going to hear a lot of groans because the students want to keep building, which to me is just music. It's just music to my ears when students are upset that they can't keep working. I love it. But the other thing is, when they know that there's going to be another chance, they don't get as upset when the time gets called. So they'll still groan, but they'll know that another opportunity is coming, so they won't be as upset about it. Of course, when they have multiple iterations, I like to use them as an engagement so prior to my standards-based lessons. And then I also like to use the second one as the culminating activity, as I mentioned in the little video at the beginning of this, because it gives them a chance to apply their learning. So I get the best of both worlds, right? It's almost like a pre and a post assessment in a way, except that I don't like to use, I find the term assessment a dirty word with STEM challenges because it sort of undermines what I'm trying to achieve with the development of the scientific reasoning, the risk taking, the creativity, and the growth mindset. I may have even said it earlier this week. I say it a lot that the success or failure of the design itself is secondary to me. Because what I'm really going for is the student's analysis, reflection, scientific reasoning. For me, it's process over product the whole way. I don't expect necessarily that their designs are going to be successful. What I expect is they're going to make an attempt at something, and then they're going to analyze and reflect, and then they're going to make a second attempt. And almost always the second attempt is more successful. So that's what I'm going for, right? But with multiple iterations, oh, I almost skipped something very important. With multiple iterations, another reason it's so important is that if you are doing the next gen science standards, the engineering standards all mention the necessity of analyzing designs and doing iterations. So if you want to hold true to the NGSS engineering standards, you do need to do multiple iterations. Again, don't beat yourself up if you can't figure out a way to fit in a multiple for every single challenge you do. Some things can be like quick writes, but you should make an attempt as often as possible. But let's be realistic. In our classrooms, it's hard enough to find time to do anything at all one time, let alone go back and do it again. So there are a couple of ideas for practical scheduling that I like to employ. One is to use centers for the second iteration. So you might have found if you built your tower on day 1, or maybe you built it yesterday on day 3, when you went to go do that, you might be like me. So when I build, I like to have a little bit of time to not feel rushed. And when there's a time constraint, as there is when we do a whole class challenge, you feel rushed. Oh my gosh, my time's running out and I only have so much time left. When you give yourself the opportunity to sort of tinker and play and not worry about the time quite as much, your brain can sort of calm down a little bit. Now, I like the idea of having the second iteration be more like that. So the first iteration is almost like a proof of concept, or, just get your brain going, get yourself fired up, and start to do something. And then in the second iteration, if you have a little bit of time, and sometimes that's just really the time of, I went home tonight and I slept on it, or the weekend and I came back next week and now I have some other ideas because my brain had time to sort of wander and meander and come up with some other ideas. I like to do an iteration, first iteration on a Friday, and then the following week when the students come back, if you have a self-contained class, this works really well. And even some single subject teachers, like in middle school, if you have a center rotation of any kind, you can put the second iteration in as a center rotation, and that's a really easy thing for you to plan because the students don't really need instruction other than the criteria and constraints list. They've already done it once, so they sort of know what's coming, and they don't need to ask you about it. So that works out really well. You can also add it for homework, for extra credit, for early finishers, if there's a rainy day recess. You don't even have to do them that close together. If you've got a sub day coming up, maybe you've got a PD you're going to be out for a couple weeks, add the second iteration in as a sub day activity a couple weeks from now. It doesn't have to be back to back. It doesn't have to be super close together. So don't worry about that. Now, I know some of you who are in here are specialist teachers. I went through and read through the comments, and a lot of people were STEM coordinators for multiple grade levels. One thing you might want to think about doing is chatting with the teachers that you are working with and seeing if they could bring in, or they could work out a way to have a multiple iteration, a second iteration in their classroom, whether that's during their science block or whether that's part of their center rotations. Especially for something like this with towers where the materials are so simple, many teachers will be willing to add that in as a center rotation. So don't miss an opportunity to collaborate, because you can find that there are plenty of ways to do this without necessarily giving up another whole class period. So that's really what I want us to work with. And if you are one of those specialist teachers, One thing you might also say to the students, if maybe collaborating with your other teachers within your school was not an option, or they're just not very receptive to it, you could tell the students, you know what, if you go home this week, maybe you see them once a week. I think that's fairly typical for the ones who are sort of like specials teachers, like art, PE, music, and maybe you have a STEM special at your school. Then what you could ask the students to do and tell them is, before you come back next week, if you build one of these towers at your house and take a picture of it, come back with it next week, and I don't know what the special thing is you could give them. Maybe there's a treat of some kind, maybe extra materials. Maybe you give them, even, you know what, I will tell you what, even just giving them a couple of pipe cleaners with some of the students is enough of a prize to get them. And a lot of times they don't even need to be bribed. They just want to do it. Let's talk about some next steps, okay? Because after today, we're officially done with this workshop, but we're not really officially done. One of the things that I do want to point out is that this has been a luxury, right? When you are planning a challenge, like we did here, we did this over 4 days, about a half an hour each day, not including the work you put in after the sessions. And it's not realistic, right? You're not going to be able to devote 2 hours to or 3 by the time you put in the extra work to every single STEM challenge you ever do. So just understand that you don't have to necessarily. I do have in my store 52 STEM challenges in print and paperless versions, and you can rest assured that the level of thought and energy that went into all of this week has gone into all of the challenges that I make. And there's also a freebie that I wanted to point out. I've pointed out a couple times this week. The STEM Challenge Starter Pack freebie is linked in the Google Doc, and it has some materials for you to start with, videos, a parent letter that's editable, and sort of shows you the catalog too of what's available in the STEM challenges. Beyond that, next steps, I want you to bookmark, if you haven't already, stemchallenge.com, because that's where you're going to see all the PD that's available to you, resources, frequently asked questions, and then there's my YouTube, all my links to everything basically. So all the different ways to get more information and more free PD and more free resources and all of that can be found starting with that hub site. You can also come to this Facebook group, the Stellar STEM Teachers Facebook group, to share your ideas, ask questions. This is ongoing, so don't think of this as this cuts off today and then there's nothing coming up. I would love for this to stay active, okay? You can follow the Feel Good Teaching Facebook page, because I do a lot of sort of informal live trainings. So I'll pop on, a few times a month, and we'll talk about either a specific thing that's come up. A lot of times someone will send me a question that I think is really interesting and might benefit a lot of people, so I'll bring that up in some informal Facebook Lives. And if you haven't already, you're going to want to definitely join the newsletter, because I do updates, promos, and giveaways. You get special coupons and freebies when you're part of the newsletter. So you want to make sure you've joined that. And everything that I've just mentioned is going to be linked again on our main Google file. Everything you need to find is there. And if you can't find something you're looking for, just ask it in this group or send me an email, Kerry, Kerry, @feelgoodteaching.com. Let's talk about your day 4 tasks, and then we're going to get into our raffle and Q&A. So on day 4, you're going to want to go ahead and finalize your lesson plan. Make sure you've scheduled it out, figured out where you're going to put everything. You're going to check out the next steps options that I just mentioned for more STEM Challenge resources and PD if you're raring to go right now. And then bonus, if you have your criteria and constraints list, you've actually gone in and you've made your tweaks, and you'd love to share it with us, I would love you to share it with us, because I think it'll be really beneficial for us to see what other people are doing in their classrooms. Make sure that you tell us your grade level so that we can sort of get an idea, and maybe we can share with each other, and maybe we'll pull ideas from each other. And please, please, please report back with student design photos and takeaways. Please bring those things to the group, whether things went really well or you ran into an obstacle or problem. That's a really helpful thing for us to brainstorm together. One thing that I saw in the Q&A earlier this week was somebody had measured their tower, they built their tower, gone to measure it, and by the time they had posted in Facebook the picture, the tower had fallen. And she had asked, what do you do in that case? So that's a great reason to build, by the way, before we actually give this to the students, is just that, the troubleshooting before the trouble. So to me, as long as the tower is standing long enough to measure it, I count it. But you might have a requirement that says the tower must stand by itself for up to a minute, or some time constraint that you want to add in there, so they understand what constitutes success. For me, if it's standing while they measure it, that's fine, even if it falls over right afterwards. And just a reminder before we do the raffle and the Q&A, a lot of times this is what school feels like for our students, and it doesn't have to. School, a lot of things, fun doesn't have to be a bad word. Fun can be rigorous and beneficial. So if you're ever in doubt, wondering if this is worth your time, don't wonder. And if your administrators need to be convinced, here are some of the benefits. One, to me, that is huge, is it brings joy back into the classroom. I call it feel-good teaching. It encourages collaboration, teamwork, and creativity. It develops the traits of growth mindset like persistence, resilience, and comfort with productive failure. It allows the students to show application of science, technology, engineering, and math skills in real-world problems. And beyond that, we saw this week with ELA and history, art, music, PE. The completed designs provide a physical context in the room to connect to standards-based lessons. And this one, actually, it accidentally highlighted out, but it levels the playing field for high and low students. We didn't really talk much about that this week, but it did talk about it in the webinar. A lot of times our students who are really good academically at the standard tasks struggle a little bit with STEM challenges, and that's really good for them. It's a good thing to experience and learn how to deal with that when you're younger than waiting until college the first time that you have a run-in with not being gloriously successful with everything you do. And a lot of times our students who struggle with academic tasks, the paper pencil stuff, really shine and excel. So it's a wonderful thing to explore multiple intelligences. Now it's time for raffle prizes. Fun stuff, right? So I have a couple of prizes, and then I have a coupon too. So the first prize is all the towers. So these are all the different versions of tower challenges that I have in my store. There's a standard card towers. We have apples aloft. We have snowman stretch, and then there's a Valentine's version. And these all come in either printable or paperless. So if you win this, I will send you an email and just ask you to let me know if you want all paperless, all printable, or if you want to mix them up. That's fine too. Doesn't matter. Just let me know. And I'm going to actually let you choose if you want all the towers or if you would rather have the back to school bundle. So the back to school bundle includes these challenges: Apples Aloft, Apples Afar, Apple Annihilator, Apple Ally, and Apples Ahead. And if you're sort of struggling, or if you get the bundle, you're going to get all 5 of those, again, in print or paperless. But everybody, so what time is it? It's 10:32 a.m. Pacific time. If you have entered the raffle before 10:32 a.m. Pacific time, you are not going to leave here empty-handed. If you have entered the raffle at all, you will get at least one STEM challenge for back to school, and I'll tell you how to claim that. And if you're wondering which one to do, obviously Apples Aloft is one of the tower challenges, but you may already be feeling very good about the tower challenge that you just created. So I'm gonna put in I love all my challenges. They're all my children, right? They're all kind of my babies. But I think Apples Ahead is one of my favorites. This is basically students are creating an apple, something to hold an apple on their head while they conduct an apple relay race. So you can find out more about that if you want to after the fact. So let me see. Is this going to get into... Okay. As soon as I get through all of these slides, I'm going to actually do the raffle live so you can see me select the winners. But everybody, no matter when if you're watching this before the end of this weekend, which is the 26th, August 26th. So everybody can get 20% off of the Feel Good Teaching shop. That's the code you need, 20 per off, so 20 per off. And that's good on anything in the store all the way through Sunday night. So let me go ahead and switch what I'm sharing with you. And I'm going to switch to, actually, let me go to camera for a second. I'm going to get rid of the agenda. I'm going to get into Chrome so you can see me choose the winners. And, okay, there's Chrome. I'm going to get rid of that. Here we go. Oh my goodness. Sorry about that. Okay, share the screen. And I'm going to go to Chrome. Ah, here we go. Okay, so the first winner is going to choose either, and you don't have to tell me right now. I will actually reach out to you after the fact and let you know or ask you which prizes you want. So your choice for this winner is either all the towers or back to school bundle. So let's choose. We're going to add a random winner, and we're going to see what we get. Caitlin, you are a winner in our raffle. So you can get all the towers or back to school bundle. And I'm going to do one more. Let me do one more on this. And I will say that you guys noticed if you entered the raffle that there were lots of different ways to enter. So it's possible that you could end up winning again. Should I allow that? I'm going to say no. Okay. I hope that's okay. So if I pull and Caitlin happens to be pulled up again, I'm going to pull another one. Okay. So we have more people. So let me do one or two more, and then we'll see how it goes. Let me see. How do I pick another one? I want to pick another one. Oh, add a random winner. Okay, here we go. So let's do another one, and this person also can choose between all the towers and the back to school bundle. Jen, you are a winner. So we have Jen and we have Caitlin. I'm just writing these down, and let's do one more. Okay, one more. Add a random winner. And Carol. All right, so Jen, Caitlin, and Carol, you can have all the towers or the back to school bundle, and everybody else who entered the raffle before 10:32 a.m. this morning is going to get an email from me, and I will send you a promo code that you can use in the Feel Good Teaching shop. So if you go to feelgoodteaching.com, this is my other website. So I have two. I have feelgoodteaching.com and stemchallenge.com. So if you go to Feel Good Teaching, you'll see up here, there's one that says shop in the tabs. So you'll go here. Now, not all of my STEM challenges are on Feel Good Teaching yet. I'm still working on getting everything loaded in, but many of them are. So if you go in here, and you will see they're categorized a little bit. So we have back to school, my St. Patrick's Day ones are up, Easter and Spring, Planetopia Project, summer STEM challenges. So I would say probably for this time of year, probably either something from the summer or from the back to school bundle will work for you. And the promo code that I will give you, you can apply. If you would rather get the whole bundle, you can apply it and it'll discount the bundle as well. So if you just go to the shop and then you click on back to school, you'll see that all of the challenges are available in paperless and printable. So if you see this the way to tell them apart is I always keep the paperless ones that are for Google Slides are always like a darker color, a dark gray, and they always have a computer on here. If they don't have that, and they'll say paperless in the title too. I know sometimes people found it a little bit confusing. So you can either get a free challenge, individual challenge, or if you decided, you know what, I just want the whole bundle, you can still use the coupon I'm going to send you to apply it to that. And remember, if you're watching this after the fact and you're feeling bummed because you didn't actually apply for the raffle or enter the raffle, there is a 20% off coupon for you. Anything in this store is 20% off all the way through the end of the weekend. So as long as you shop before Sunday night, 11:59 p.m., you'll be all set. And it's, again, the code was 20 per off. 20 per off. Okay, so now we are done with the raffle. Thank you guys so much for joining me this week. And I will ask again, if you haven't already, many of you who did the raffle actually already gave me some feedback on this workshop. And if you haven't had a chance yet, I know some people are working through this after the fact. Some of you might be watching this months from now even, because I think I'm just going to leave it up so that you have the opportunity whenever you're ready to go through the workshop. Please give me some feedback and let me know, if you haven't already, how this worked out for you. If there's something that worked well or did not work well, I'm interested in both aspects of that so that I can improve and think of ideas for future challenges or future workshops that we do. So I have some in mind already, but I always want to know what you guys want to know. So please, please, please reach out. Let me know. Don't think of this as something, if you're watching it months from now, that I'm not interested in hearing. I'm always interested in hearing it. So I'm not seeing any questions that have popped up today. But again, this isn't like the end forever. If you come up with a question later on, please just post it in the group. You can post it anywhere. You can send it to me in email. You can direct message me, whatever works for you. I'd love to see it in the group just because if you have a question, probably others would benefit from seeing your question and the discussion that comes from it. So, okay, I guess that's it. And I will be reaching out to the winners in just a few minutes to let you know how to, either to ask you which prize you're going to claim. Oh yeah, and then everybody else who entered the raffle, I'll send you an email just afterwards with your promo codes. And I guess that's it. We're already to the end. Hope you guys are having a great week and have a wonderful weekend. And I will see you around because I do PD all the time and I'm doing lives a lot in the Facebook page as well. So have a great day. Bye.